Hello, and welcome to your creative and magical life, which is hopefully your actual life, but is also this podcast, which explores the intersections of tarot, creativity, magic, anti capitalism, social justice, and all sorts of metaphysical and mystical stuff, all with the goal of helping you cultivate a life that sparkles with magic and creativity. I'm your host, Cecily Saylor. I'm a tarot reader, a writer, a steward of creativity. I'm a double Capricorn who worships birds and dogs and all of nature. And I'm the creator of Typewriter Tarot, a project that helps people unleash their magic and creativity. Welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's make some magic. In this very first episode, we are exploring, quite appropriately, the Fool, the very first card in the tarot. But before we get into the Fool, I want to pay a quick tribute to my mom and dad, who each in their own way helped me discover the magic of this world we inhabit. I'll start with my mom. When I was a kid, she would sometimes wake me up very early before the sun came up, and we would get in the car, this old Honda Civic, and we would drive to the mall with our sack lunches. And in the parking lot, the dark parking lot of the mall, we would meet up with a bunch of what I thought at the time were dorky old folks. And we would all get in a van together, which sounds a little suspicious, but uh, we would get in that van and we would drive out of the city and we would go to the woods or we would go to the marshes or the prairies and spend the day looking for birds. And as you can imagine, I didn't particularly love this activity at the time. I didn't look forward to it, though maybe secretly I did enjoy it once we were out there. But decades later, I am a total bird nerd now, and birds are one of the ways I feel deeply connected to the magic of the world. When I look at birds, something inside me lightens, something becomes much more airy and floaty, and my mood improves. I feel inspired. I could watch birds all day long. And I have taken steps in my own life to make sure I can see birds all day out my window. Um, but you'll probably hear me talking more about birds from time to time. But thank you, Mom, for showing me the beauty that's out there in the world and showing me how to go out and look for it and how to let myself fall in love with it. I am grateful and I love you. And this was not the only lesson in magic you have given me, but it's one that stands out. And then for my dad, he's the one who showed me that the moon didn't just get bigger and smaller, but there was actually a shadow cast on the moon, and you could see its full outline even when it was almost totally dark. And he explained to me how the tides worked. And when I was a kid, he also worked in radio in small town stations outside of Houston. And when I would spend the weekends with him, I would often end up sitting in the press box at a high school football game or baseball game, or I would be with him in the booth at the radio station. Most of those stations played old country songs, and sometimes he would put me on the mic and I would say hello to the people out there in a squeaky little voice. And my dad is 75 now, and he has never listened to a podcast, kind of on principle. The other day we were talking about it, and he said, I worked so hard to break into radio, and now just any old Yahoo can get on there and go blah, blah, blah. So here I am doing that, but it feels really sweet to be behind the microphone as I think back to those times when I was a kid, watching him set up his equipment and kind of speak out into what seemed like the void, but was really connecting with a lot of folks in his community. So thank you, Dad. I love you too. Glad to be glad to be your kid, finding my way. All right. So back to the Fool. I'm going to talk a little bit about this card, what it looks like, what some of those symbols imply, and some of the meanings associated with it. I'll share a story about how this card took shape in my life. And then we're going to talk with another member of the Typewriter Tarot team, Annar Veröld, who has her own story to share about the Fool. And then we'll finish with a creative prompt that you can use to work with this card. So the Fool is, as I said, the very first card in the tarot, the card that initiates and sets us into the story of tarot, this wild adventure of learning and discovery and development. And the Fool is assigned the number 0. And that's the only card in the tarot that has the number 0. Of course, the tens have a 0 in them, but that's a bit different. The 0 itself is the only number we have to represent nothingness. It's the number before the numbers start counting and creating substance, let's say. So, and even if we look at the shape of a 0, it's like an egg. It's this unhatched thing that is ready to break forth. It's full of potential and possibility, but the story hasn't been written yet. We're here at the beginning, ready to go out there and find out. And the Fool is in this moment of departure and setting out on their own path. And I also see the Fool as a kind of protagonist in the tarot. One of the things I loved about tarot from the very beginning, as someone who had a background as a writer and wanted to be a writer since I was a kid, when I stumbled upon tarot, I just realized how it was a storytelling device, and it speaks to us in story. It shows us stories about ourselves, stories about what's possible. And in our stories, we always have a protagonist, a character who will move through the events and be shaped and go through hardship and conflict, and who will fail and pick themselves back up. And through all of that, be changed and shaped and molded and come to some kind of realization or discovery. And so the Fool is that person, and we are always the Fool. We are the protagonist in our own lives. At any given moment, we can take on Fool energy and go in a new direction. And we ourselves are always moving the story forward based on our actions, based on our intentions. And the Fool always reminds us of that. So when you look at this card, and I'm thinking in particular of the Smith Rider Waite deck and the Fool in that set of archetypes, we have this figure who's about to step off a cliff and is in the actual stepping motion. There is a yellow sky in the background and a bright white sun, and the Fool is dressed quite fancifully and is holding over their shoulder a wand with a knapsack tied to the end. In the other hand, which is cast behind, the Fool is holding a white rose. There's a feather in the Fool's cap. And down at the feet, there's a white dog kind of prancing around. So that's the picture we're given. We can kind of break that apart or look more closely. So if we look at the yellow sky, usually the sky is blue. This yellow sky gives us a lot of optimism and radiance. It kind of reminds us of the sun itself and all of this light and all of this opportunity. The fanciful dress of the Fool connotes a sense of playfulness and a willingness to be noticed. Like the Fool, it's kind of like when you're going out into the world, whether you have to like go to the grocery store or go to the coffee shop, you can either roll out in your pajamas or you can get fully dressed, because you never know who you're going to meet. And it feels like the Fool is doing the latter. They're bringing their best clothes out. They don't know who's going to be out there, but they want to kind of show what they have to offer. They want to be noticed. They want to present themselves in this playful and fanciful way. And there's also this sense of joyfulness through the outfit that the Fool is wearing. The dog at the feet is a companion, a familiar. The Fool is not just traveling entirely on their own. They have this element of nature that's on their side that may act as a protective force or help them to follow their instincts. The knapsack on the end of the wand there, we can think of as the experiences that the Fool has gathered so far in life. So while there is this kind of blank slate quality to the Fool, there's also, like I said, this opportunity to be the Fool at any moment and to step forward and go in a new direction. And so that means we do have some experience we can take with us. But because the knapsack is quite small, there's the sense that those experiences are not overbearing, like they're an asset, a tool, something that the Fool can draw on, but not something that the Fool is overly attached to. Because if we're going to stay attached to all of the old experiences, it's going to be really hard to create something new. I've also seen the knapsack described as a container of the things that the Fool would put on their altar to use in the making of magic. So, whether that's like crystals or sage or smoke or other magical objects, even a tarot deck, perhaps. These are things that the Fool could lay out in any place at any time to make the magic they need to make. The feather in the Fool's cap is a symbol of life force and vitality, the sense of jolliness. When we think of old stories where someone puts a feather in their cap, there's this kind of like, let me go greet the world with a sense of happiness or lightness. Let me kind of share or transmit this feeling of ebullience to the people around me through the feather in my cap. The cliff is really important. The Fool is about to step off. And in real life, that would be quite dangerous, right? But the Fool here is moving from a sense of trust that the universe is going to provide a safe landing, is going to take them to the next stop on their journey where they'll find a teacher, they'll find a lesson, they will find refuge, something that will shape them, but all along the way, they will be protected. And then that white rose, roses are symbols of passion, but the white rose offers this sense of purity, kind of like the passion for something more spiritual, or, not just the passion that we uh, utilize in moving our senses or creating sensory experiences, but also this passion for what spirit can teach us. And then we have that white sun shining overhead, offering this kind of blankness, this intense light, creating a new canvas and a sense of possibility. So when people see this card in a reading, if they don't know a lot about tarot, they see the Fool and they feel a little called out. Like, oh, am I the dumbass who's doing this thing? Or like, maybe I've made a big mistake or I've gotten things wrong. And I really don't see the Fool as being a judgment. I don't feel like any of the cards are ever a judgment. They're really an opportunity. And this one is always an invitation to begin again, to take a leap, to go in a new direction. Some of the other meanings we can associate with the Fool are action, eagerness, adventure, and committing to the journey instead of the outcome. So we're doing something because we want to find out what happens for us as we go along. We're not doing it because we need it to look a specific way in the end, or we feel like it's only worth doing if X, Y, or Z is going to happen when we finish. That's always a losing gambit, often. So there's a lot of non-attachment in the Fool. There's a lot of curiosity and discovery, and also courage and optimism. The Fool is a representative of the road less traveled. And it could even be, your new commitment to living a more creative and magical life, even if you don't yet know how. But as I think I said, we can at any time experience the Fool. It is never too late for us to initiate a new beginning. We're never too old. We're never too anything. The Fool's energy is always available. Here are some things the Fool is not. The Fool is not a big planner necessarily. The Fool does not need to know ahead of time in order to go out there and start traveling. The Fool does not need things to work out a certain way in order for it all to be worth it. And the fool is not going to do it the way that others have done it. They are willing to go down a path that others have not yet traveled. They are not really interested in following the rules or following the formulas. And they're not going to be interested in like only driving the paved roads. They want to wander out into the wilderness and see what is beyond. So, this is a really beautiful card. And um, in my own life, the Fool card is deeply connected to the origins of this whole project. So, it makes sense, of course, that this first episode of this new podcast, we're going to focus on the Fool. I don't know a lot of things that I'm going to find out about podcasting. I have podcasted before with a collaborator, but I haven't done it on my own. So I don't fully know like what all the work entails or how exactly I might want people to help me. I don't know who's going to listen. I don't know how many people are going to listen. I don't know who's going to review it or what kind of reviews are going to come out. I don't know how this might create opportunities for me in the future. My hope is that it will, and that it will create connections and community, and my trust that it will, and my action and my forward movement will surely cultivate that. But I can't know in advance. I'm just kind of setting off into this podcasting journey and we'll see, right? The same thing happened with Typewriter Tarot in the first place. This podcast is an outgrowth of Typewriter Tarot, but Typewriter Tarot is something I started back in 2017. And at that point in my life, I was a year from getting sober from alcohol. And you'll hear me talk about this sometimes too, just because it was like a really big turning point in my life. I had struggled with alcohol dependence and addiction for a long time and finally got to the place of desperation where I was willing to change. I started doing therapy for real. I sought recovery in a number of different ways. And it was incredibly profound for me because before that, I felt really hopeless. I felt like my life was always going to be this big drag where I was really just like pulling myself forward to like do the things I was supposed to do. But that I would do that without feeling much satisfaction or purpose or meaning. The things I think I deeply wanted in life, I felt were unavailable to me. And then when I got sober and started healing, I was like, my life started to change. And I was like, oh, transformation is a actual thing that even totally hopeless people can find because I was one of them. And so because of the support I had had in that recovery journey in that first year, I was getting to this place where I really wanted to be able to pass it on. This is very common when you go through a recovery process. You're like very moved and you want to spread kind of the possibility and the joy that came to you onto other people. And I thought about going back to school for therapy and becoming a therapist, but it seemed like a lot of schooling, a lot of money, a lot of time. I was late in my 30s, and I was like, how can I do this? How can I do this? And then at that time, my boyfriend at the time had moved in. I lived in a small house. He had, some stuff, and I had some stuff. And I'm a Capricorn who likes to sort and organize and keep things relatively minimal. So I was finding things that we could get rid of because there were duplicates or we weren't going to use it or whatever. And one of them was this zombie themed tarot deck. I had actually had a tarot deck. I had the Smith Rider Waite deck in my office closet for probably 10 years and I never touched it because I thought you had to be psychic or you had to have like a witchy grandma who would teach you. And I had opened it maybe once or twice and I was like, I don't know. And I put it back. And so this zombie deck came into my house and I was like, I think my stepsister would love this deck. I'm going to give it to her. And the next time I saw her, I gave it to her and we decided to do a reading with it. And we used the little book. There was a spread in the book and we tried it. And I know my sister very well. We're very close. And the cards that came up, I was just like, holy shit, this is insane how accurate these cards are for what's going on in my sister's life. And at that point, I was like, oh, this is the thing I've been looking for. This is the tool. This is the method. This is the vehicle I might be able to use to engage with people and talk to them about transformation and possibility. And within a week, I think, of that happening, I just kept waking up with this feeling of like, this is it. I've got to start a thing. And I went down the rabbit hole. I started listening to the podcasts and finding books. I got a notebook and I started taking notes on all the different cards, which is not how I would recommend you do it if you're starting out, but that's how I did it. And then I started practicing and reading for people. And even before I really fully understood everything I probably needed to know about tarot, I came up with my business name. I started practicing readings. I was giving readings for free. And I put out my first Instagram post under Typewriter Tarot on June 24th, 2017. So Typewriter Tarot is a Cancer. She's lovely. Um, and that first post was about the Fool. And here's what it said. In the past year, I became enthralled, enwrapped, and delighted by the mysteries and insights contained in the tarot cards. Now, much like the Fool, I'm jaunting off into the unknown, tarot deck in hand, deeply curious, filled with excitement, but only partially prepared. I'm guaranteed to stumble, but sure to gather a great deal more wisdom along the way. What I look forward to most are the people I'll meet as I go, those who are willing to sit down with me and listen to whatever story the cards have to tell. Some days they scream at us, open your eyes, listen to your heart, stop wasting time. Other days they quietly whisper, you've had a rough go. You're stronger than you think. There's something brighter awaiting you. So off I go with a little bag of hope slung over my shoulder. Thanks for joining me. And that's really kind of what the Fool is about. And if we think about the knapsack, the stuff that I had in the knapsack, like I didn't know anything about tarot before that reading with my sister. You know, like I said, I had that deck, but I didn't touch it. It was like too much. It's like, I don't know, I can't deal with this. But then when I started to learn and committed to learning, that started to grow. And then what I carried with me was experience that I could apply to creating this business, this project. I had coached writers before, I had led workshops, I had organized events, I had interviewed and talked to people one on one as a journalist, and was, especially as an introvert, I learned really early in life that asking people questions was a way to engage because I didn't know how to like charm them. Unless I was drinking, then I could be very funny, which led to my addiction. Anyway, I had all of that experience. I also had experience in marketing and some social media experience and sending out promotional emails. And of course, there was so much I didn't know yet. And there was a lot to be afraid of. Like, no one in my life knew me as someone who read tarot. And then here I was starting a little business about tarot. And I was like, what are these people going to think? Like, Cecily, what the fuck are you doing? This isn't you. Of course, my friends who love me and my family who love me were supportive and became increasingly more interested because I was interested. Um, so that's what was in my knapsack. I wasn't going to apply those skills in the same way that I had been before, but they could all translate into this experience of like going into something totally new and unknown. And then because I chose to go on this journey, because I followed that call, I was able to create this like side hustle business that I ran for 6 or 7 years while I was working in nonprofits, which did not pay me enough to support my life. So I often had a side hustle. Typewriter Tarot became one of them. It grew and grew and grew. When I got laid off from a job in 2021, my business was at a place where I was like, ugh, that was another full moment. I was like, I guess I'm going to take this full time. I don't know how it's going to support me. It wasn't there yet. It's still kind of getting there, if I'm honest. And so it required a lot of trust. But as I continued to go on the journey, I met more people. I started partnerships with like coffee shops and other kinds of teachers. I co-hosted retreats. I met all, I would go to these markets and read tarot at markets where like there were a lot of other kinds of healers. So I met people who did crystal stuff, and I met herbalists and Reiki healers and all kinds of super interesting people that I was not going to meet in my nonprofit life. And I also met a lot of teachers who had a great deal of wisdom and expertise in healing, somatics, energy work, growing a spiritual business. And so, here we are again, another full moment as the podcast comes out at this phase of the business's development. And it's really exciting. So I did not know what I was doing when I started Typewriter Tarot, but I didn't let that stop me. And the universe brought me the opening that I had been seeking. Like I said, I was looking for a way, and the universe gave me one that I was totally not suspecting. I never, if you had told me, if anyone told me 10 years ago that in 2023 I would have a 7-year-old tarot business that had helped hundreds of people through readings or workshops or coaching, I would have, I'm not a violent person, but I would have been so shocked I might have slapped you. It just seemed that would have seemed completely impossible to me. And so the Fool is about that. It takes us into what feels impossible. We have to be willing to think beyond what our brain will tell us about where we've been. It will crack that open and create a new path if we're willing to go in that direction. And when tarot showed up, I felt like it was my responsibility to say yes and to pack up my little knapsack and to put one foot in front of the other and just keep going. So that's my story. That's my full story. And as you can see, it happened before and it's happening again. And the Fool can always show up for us again and again. So now I have one more story to share. We're going to bring on Annar Veröld to share her story with the Fool, which is a bit different and incredibly beautiful. And Annar has been working with me at Typewriter Tarot for a couple years now. She's edited videos and made graphics and written beautiful blog posts. She actually has a piece on our blog now about the Fool card, and you can go there and read it, and you will find the link in the show notes. And that story is actually linked to another piece she wrote about the Death card, which I will also link to in the show notes. And for Annar, these two cards are very related, and she'll talk about that. Annar is also a writer. She's a filmmaker, a photographer, a graphic designer. She is a like aficionado of color. She's a purveyor of books. She also currently works at Host Publications, which publishes emerging authors. She ran and created a project called Ice Cream Social, which brought, I think, exclusively women and femme writers to read their work at Malvern Books, which was a local bookstore in Austin. That'll come up in our conversation as well. She's also a Capricorn like me, and she can do so many different things. She's incredibly talented and just a beautiful person to share space with. So let's see what she has to share. Hello, Annar. Thank you so much for coming on this very first episode of Your Creative and Magical Life.
Thank you so much for having me, Cecily. What an honor to be on the very, very first episode of your new podcast.
And what a delight for me and everyone listening. I am really interested and very excited to talk to you about the Fool. And let's set this up a little bit, kind of rewind a smidge. You wrote a beautiful piece on our blog, which everyone should read, about being stalked by the death card, which will be a future episode. But this is context for you coming into your Fool era. So, first, before the Fool showed up, it was death card time. And I wonder if you could start there and give us a little context, like what was going on before the Fool swooped in to mix things up for you.
Oh my gosh. Firstly, thank you so much for publishing that incredibly bizarre and intense musing Um, it really just totally belongs in the Typewriter Tarot blog sphere, and I feel so lucky that folks can read and resonate with it. Um, but the death card stalked me for maybe at least 6 months. It, kind of poked its head up a few times, um, here and there, and, you know, maybe other people are a bit more pulled together and functional, but I would see that card at the beginning and pretend to not see it. I was like, that is a mistake. That is not for me because I'm already so sad and so dysfunctional. What more could it want from me? And the beauty of tarot is that it will haunt you. It will aggressively be like, no, this is not a mistake. And you will pull it like, it got to the point where I was pulling it back to back. Like I would reshuffle my deck, like, that was a mistake. That's not for me. I want a fun card. I want the sun. I want I want something bright, something pretty. And I'd reshuffle my deck and I would pull the death card again. And it just kept happening for months.
Tarot is
Um,
not interested in our denial. It is
Not at
a
all.
truth teller. And I want to I mean, dysfunctional seems a little bit harsh. I don't talk about my friend Anar like that. But you were going through a period of grief, like quite a
Mhm.
lot of grief, understandably, having lost a dear friend and a coworker and a colleague, and it really rocked your boat as such things do.
Exactly. I Now that I'm in a much better place, I can see and reflect back on the dysfunction of my life after losing my dear friend Joe and in the many ways in which I struggled and I was just doing my best, which you're right. I shouldn't say I was completely dysfunctional, but in that moment, in that period of time of grief, like my whole life was falling apart. And before Death Card emerged, I was going through the world, which was this huge shift in, like, Joe wasn't only someone that I had a lot of fun with and I loved, but it was someone that I, you know, almost idolized and really admired and was part of so many of the wonderful things that he built. So when he vanished and his world vanished, I found myself kind of, like, who am I? Why am I?
Mm.
And this is kind of where the fool comes in. I moved through the world. I moved through death. And then there was this really like a decimation, kind of like a burning of a forest and like just left with like ashes and barren land and like just gray and like nothing. And you would think, knowing going through death and experiencing the hardship of the world, that it would be bleak. But to start the fool in this place where it's like, I'm no one and
Mm.
I'm nothing. And that's kind of like fun because the fool encouraged me to like just be like a baby in many ways.
I love that. Yeah, and coming back to that word dysfunction really quick, I want to say, it's not always, sometimes we're not functional, and that's okay. And I think what that word sometimes means is like we're not functioning in the ways like the constructed world needs us to
Mhm.
function, to go to work and be productive and look mm, happy or satisfied. Like sometimes we feel like utter shit for a really long
Mhm.
time. Sometimes we do not have the energy or the spirit to be motivated, to be invested, to feel passionate about something. And especially when you feel like your world has been obliterated, what functioning do you need to be doing other than like, you kind of fall into a sort of existential void, which is very confusing and very lonely. But thankfully, we don't stay there forever. And like you emerged like the fool, this new baby
Yeah.
with, and I love that idea of like being no one in a way. I think we are very attached to our identities. And I think that's important as we like grow and figure out what we want to become. But there's also something really freeing in being like, I am somebody, but I'm also nobody. Or
Mhm.
I can start over and be a different somebody when I want to. So I just want to honor your journey. I know it's been really challenging. And I see how beautifully you've navigated it and brought yourself to a place that feels more exciting and invigorating. So let's talk about that. When did you feel like the fool first showed up? And had you finally accepted the death card as like a message? And yeah, when did the fool come and what was your initial feeling about that?
My gosh. Well, the death card was relentless, and it just anytime I pulled the deck out, there it was. And then one day, I did the work. I wrote it took me a few months to like put together this piece for you that you published on the blog, and I was actively moving through that card. And when I sent it your way, the Fool started to emerge around that time, and I had completed that card, and it was gruesome. And then I started to pull the Fool, which I felt so much relief. It's an adorable card. I'm like, I wanna be cute again. I wanna be fun again. I want a cute little dog, and I wanna jump off a cliff. Like, the Fool is just so cute to me, and yeah, especially pulling it from the Fyodor Pavlov deck, which has my favorite Fool, which is a Perot, like a clown, kind of dancing with a black cat, and she's, like, beautiful and graceful, and I'm a huge clown history nerd, and yeah, I'm like, "This is who I am now," kind of anticipating. But part of moving through the death card for me towards the end there was a huge requirement that I think that the death card wanted me to apply was to try something new and to rebuild my connection with others. And so I started to play in my community orchestra, and I started to surround myself around people for the first time in several years that I'd never met and that I'd never seen, and that work jobs that I've never heard of and have children and like these full lives and these different beliefs and these different values, and I started to see maybe myself really pared down. You
Mm,
walk into a room full of people that have no notion as to who you are,
mm,
and it's like, who am I? That is kind of a thrilling like confrontation or experience to have.
Yeah, it's like when you go to a new school or like you go to camp for the summer and no one there knows you and you get to sort of put on a different persona. And, with Joe, you and Joe helped run a bookstore, a press. You built this community around books and a love of books. And there was so much richness in that world that maybe you kind of like just, hung out there like most of your time. It was so rich and full, and there were so many people coming through and so many friends. And as you described, when Joe passed, that whole world kind of, I mean, it didn't all fall apart, but a lot of it really shifted and got very shook up. And after some
Mhm.
months, the bookstore closed and the press is still going for now. But you went out and you were kind of willing to say, like, there are other worlds out there for me, and let me go step into one and see what happens. And then you got to
Exactly.
be. How do you feel like you are being the fool? I think there's, when a card keeps showing up for us, there's both the message it brings in, the kind of nudge it's giving us, or the reflection that it's showing us about where we are, or something we can do to facilitate change, or to work with the energy of our lives in a productive way or in a satisfying way. So there's what comes in from the card, and then there's the part where we try it on like an outfit and we try to see the part of ourself that is in the card. And so I wonder,
Gosh.
what how do you see yourself in the fool's outfit?
I really love that you use the word outfit because I think about the fool and my body
Mm.
really comes to mind, and the spaces in which my body is present in really comes to mind because to me, the beauty of wearing the costume of the fool and being aware of my body is also being aware of my own limitations. And so, for the first time in a really long time, I have been really embracing not knowing and being kind of clumsy and being kind of vulnerable and being in spaces where I'm like, I don't know what this means. Can you tell me? There's this ownership of what is there and what I have to offer. And, if I look really closely, it's like in many ways, not much sometimes. And I'm kind of just like, I don't know what this is. And instead telling myself that this is a shortcoming and I should feel embarrassed that I don't know how many flats are in this scale or, you know, whatever I'm encountering that is new, I'm approaching it just like, I don't know, but I want to know. And
Mm.
I'm learning that like people welcome that. That's not something to be ashamed of. And that curiosity is like the magic that I've pulled from the fool. And curiosity is like so beautiful and so sexy and so fun and like it's a whole new way to be that I used to not be because I thought that I felt this pressure to be a professional and to have read every book that I'm trying to sell or to know everything there is about publishing or to be a leader instead of a learner. That's kind of the image, the costume of just curiosity, of just unknowing. There's some naivety
Mm.
that, can make me feel a little insecure, but you can't you can't hate me for wanting to know more.
I could never hate you, Anar, never. I know you didn't mean it like that. You're so lovable, just want to say. But I love that you highlighted curiosity. I think that's such an important part of the Fool, and it's so important as well that the Fool is the beginning of the tarot. And so we have to start with curiosity. We cannot come into the tarot acting like we know everything, and who could approach those 78 cards with like a know-it-all attitude. And maybe that's why some people don't pick it up, because it's a lot of unknowns. I think that's part of why I didn't pick it up for a long time, even though I had a deck in my possession for 10 years at least. But the curiosity piece is like the fuel, the gasoline, the nourishment, whatever that we need to like keep going on this journey in a sustainable way. And when we stop being curious, that means we've defined a story, we've narrowed things down, we've turned ourselves into an expert, and then we're not really interested in learning anymore. And then we kind of calcify and we get outdated. And so I think it's so important that you brought that up. And I love how going into this orchestra brought you into like, I just think it's such a perfect place, setting, I don't know, a whole new world for you and for anyone. Like you had to come back and maybe learn your connection to the instrument, which I'm going to ask you about in a second. You had to learn like who are these people? Like how do they, who's friends with who, or like who's in charge, or who are some of the leaders? What is the culture of this orchestra? Like how do they do things? Do I like that? Do I not like that? How can I fit into the culture? Or what can I bring just through my presence? Because I'm not going to bring a lot of expertise. I'm here to kind of listen and learn. And then there's the whole part of making the music, which requires like presence and attention and so much listening. And that feels very much in the spirit of the Fool, too. So, once you embrace the Fool and you join the orchestra and you step into the space where all these other people are musicians, first tell us the instrument that you play.
I play I say this with a little bit of embarrassment, but so much pride. I play the French horn
Why embarrassment?
because I feel like people can look at me and they know that I play the French horn. I've had that happen. People have looked at me and they were like, "You played French horn in high school."
Hmm,
There's a certain type of person that a French hornist is typically selected
okay.
as to be, uh, which is a very type A, um,
Okay.
tightly wound, teacher's pet,
Mm.
um, type of person, and I would say that there's 13 of us, there's 13 horns, and it feels like it's all very true, getting to know
Okay.
each one of them. I'm like, "Oh boy, we're
A little
all
taste of your
we're
own
all the same."
medicine.
Yes.
Okay, so you're playing the French horn. Tell me, like, you listen to the Fool, you join the orchestra, you decided 13 is a magical number. You decided to be part of a community of 13 French horns, among other instruments. And like, what did embracing that do for you? Like, what is it like to be in that room, to be playing, to be hearing all of the sounds, sometimes in harmony, sometimes not in harmony? What is the return, I guess, on the investment of the Fool for you?
There's something really, really beautiful about taking up that 13th seat.
Mm,
Um, so if you know me and if you are familiar with me, then I personally consider myself someone who, when dedicated, is becomes a very skilled person with different things. And so I am very passionate and interested in lots of things, and I try my very best to master. But there's something about the horn that, especially being part of the orchestra, where there isn't this need to be the best. horn. We've got some amazing hornists that have played for decades who are very skilled and just sound like angels. And there's something about being the 13th horn and being the newest and the youngest of the crop that allows me to be clumsy in a way that other areas of my life do not accept or welcome. There's a lot of space to lean over to someone and be like, what does that mean? I missed every single note. I am sorry. And the beautiful thing about the community orchestra is that anyone who has an instrument, even if they haven't played in 60 years, which that is the situation I saw someone come in, they said, I stopped playing tuba after I got married at the age of 21. And I just saw it and was like, sure, why not? Anyone that is willing to show up is welcome, which is such a beautiful thing. And then there's people, like I said, who have played for decades without putting their horn down. It is truly a welcoming and embracing environment. Do we get yelled at a little bit for missing notes and starting early? Of course. But there isn't this like, you guys suck air about it. It truly is such a remarkable place to embrace the fool.
I love that someone came in at, I don't know, running the math, that's like 80 or something. Uh, Note to everyone listening, it is never too late to step into Fool energy. If you are here and breathing and you can pick up a tuba, then you can be the Fool in that way. And I'm curious, Anar, letting yourself be clumsy in this space or just having no choice but to be clumsy. You and I are birthday twins. We are Capricorns, so I know what it's like to want to be super good at something and how it feels when you are bad at something. Has that freedom to be clumsy and to not know and to mess up, has it bled over? Has it translated? Has it given you something for other parts of life too?
Absolutely. It has given me like thinking about self-compassion, which I think is kind of at the core of all of these lessons in the tarot. But thinking about self-compassion, I have been able to, if my partner's like, you didn't wash the dishes or you forgot to run the dishwasher, like, not that AJ is like that, but little things where in the past I've been corrected or I've made mistakes, instead of completely shutting down and really becoming aggressive towards myself and maybe short with others,
Mm,
now I'm able to be like, I really forgot. I'm really sorry. Like I'm able to step up and take ownership for all of the mistakes and imperfections that I bring along in my daily life. And there's also this kind of like element of hope where it's like, I'm not very good at my skills right now, but I think I can get better. There's more hope to become a better writer and a better friend, and maybe someday this year get my driver's license. It expands through all corners of of my life.
yeah, I love that. The self-compassion is so important. I do think that the tarot offers us that gift every reading, and it's one reason I advocate everybody get a deck and use it and build that relationship, because it's a relationship you're building with yourself, and it's kinder, it's loving, it offers you support and direction, and it's just a marvelous undertaking. And I wonder, if you, to anyone out there listening, if there's someone out there who is in the throes of pulling the Fool on repeat, what advice would you give them?
My gosh, this is such a perfect question because this morning I was reading this collection of poetry titled Time by Etel Adnan. And I read this line that I was like, I want to bring this to the podcast. And the line was, enter the labyrinth that you are. It's so it's so perfect. I think being open and being curious and really following the fool and their familiar as they leap into an abyss or a labyrinth or, into a new world. It's a lot of fun here in the Fool. I don't know if it's gonna be as fun anywhere else.
Yeah, I think too, you hit on something. I love that quote, enter the labyrinth of who you are. That is the other promise tarot gives to us. It will help us enter that labyrinth. But another thing in your story, or that's coming up for me around the Fool, is that the Fool will keep moving. Like the curiosity will continue to pull the Fool forward. Like, well, if this is possible, what else is possible? And the Fool is on that journey through every one of the major arcana cards. And so, yes, the Fool will meet death and will have to like learn the lessons that death offers. And same with the Tower and the Hermit and all of the major arcana cards. But after each lesson, the Fool is willing to continue going. And I
Mm.
think that's something that is hopeful for me, even when stuff is like real rough, real hard, when we feel real bottom, when we feel obliterated or lost, there is a moment when we can get ready to move forward again. And there's something on the other side of that. And I think the more times we do that, the more we're able to see a difficult situation as like, this is not the end. This is not the defining forever of the rest of my life. This is a thing that is really hard and kind of shitty. And I feel terrible. But the Fool has taught me that there's a way to move forward. And maybe I don't know what that is now, but I will be shown that. I will become clearer on that in time. I don't have to know that right this second, but I can stay curious about what that can look like for me. And I think that's really
Yes,
beautiful.
love it.
Anar, thank you so much for sharing all of this, your beautiful journey. Anar's piece about the death card is incredible. It is lyrical. It is a beautiful tribute in a way to Joe and a beautiful tribute to your experience. And one thing I didn't get to say was just how magical I think it is that once you became willing to kind of own the hard like the terrible difficulty of losing Joe and all that that upended for you, to own it and to like hold it from a little bit of a distance and put it into language, such beautiful language, and to share it in a somewhat public way. That was an alchemizing process that made, it's interesting that after you did that, the Fool started showing up. It was like you digested something, you alchemized something, you processed something on another level. You weren't just like feeling it and feeling it and feeling it. You made meaning out of it and you crafted it into a story about your life and made it available to help other people, which I know it has. So that's just incredible. And I'm really grateful that you were willing to share that. And folks out there, you can go to our blog, typewritertarot.com. Just hit that blog. Um, that blog button, and you can find Anar's piece on the death card. And she's also got a piece about the Fool card. So you can read them side by side to get a little bit more from this conversation. But Anar, thank you so much for everything that you have shared with us in writing and through your beautiful voice. And maybe we'll get your horn on here one time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Cecily.
Okay, friends, here is your creative prompt for the Fool. It's very simple. I want you to think about a place that you haven't been, but you've been thinking about going. You've seen it as you were driving by, or as you were taking the bus or the train, or going for a walk. You've been curious about it, but you haven't actually stepped inside. And you're going to go to this place. But before you do, I want you to pick out your outfit. You don't have to get like dressed up, you don't have to put on makeup, but choose something to wear that feels appropriate for you, that allows you to express yourself, or that makes you feel jovial, light, cheerful, open, curious, something that kind of transmits an energy that you feel good about putting into the world. For example, I I wear heart-shaped sunglasses. For a long time they were my backup pair, and then I always lose sunglasses, so they became my regular pair. And part of that had to do with the fact that when some people see me wearing the heart-shaped glasses and they smile, or they they're like, "I love your glasses." Like, it brings joy to some people, and I love that. I feel really good about that. I tend to have kind of a stoic, serious, we might say a resting bitch face sometimes, but and that's not what's in my heart most of the time. It's just how I look. But the sunglasses kind of convey this like, I love you. I love the world. I don't know you, but here's a little bit of love. So think about what your outfit could be. That could be a t-shirt. It can be whatever. It can be a pair of shoes. Just think about it. Don't overthink it. Pick out your outfit, pick a time, and also take something, prepare a little like knapsack type of thing. So maybe you're going to bring a journal with you, um, and maybe a snack. Maybe it's your bottle of water. It can be really simple. If you're going into a shop, for example, there might be something that you want to show the people who work there. Like maybe it's something that you've made, or um, maybe it's like a playlist or a musician or something you want to share with someone. You don't necessarily have to bring it out, but I want you to bring it with you. It could also be like a talisman or a important object or special object to you that you're just going to carry in your pocket, carry in your bag, whatever the case may be. Go into this space and just see what happens. Be open, bring an openness. Look around you, have a chat with someone, say hello, pick up a weird object, pick up something new. Maybe you're in a museum and you're just looking at the art, taking it in. If it feels appropriate, get out your objects or get out your object and use it, connect with it, sit with it. If it's a journal, write in it, see what comes out, and just go on this little journey of curiosity. That's all you need to do. See what happens. Notice, did you have any resistance going through this exercise or this practice? And what happened to that resistance by the time you actually did the thing? What did you find out about your fear once it all took place? What did you find out about your resistance? And what did you find out about what the universe had to show you through this experience when you showed up with a sense of curiosity, when you were ready to make a discovery, when you came out into the world transmitting some of that jovial, excited energy? And, let me hear from you. If it was a cool experience or not, feel free to write in. You can find us at hello@typewritertarot.com. Let me know how it goes and have fun. If you liked what you heard today, if you are interested in tarot, if you are a creative spirit, if you want to make more magic in your life, I think you might like some of the other stuff we're doing at Typewriter Tarot. We have workshops, we have a free creative coven 8 times a year. And really importantly, something I'm very excited about in the coming year is the Creative Magic Collective, which is going to start in March. This is a 12-month group experience It's going to be based on a workbook I created called Tarot for Creative Spirits. This workbook has a journaling prompt for every card in the tarot deck. And the purpose of the book is to help you connect with the cards on a personal level, because the prompts are going to ask you about yourself and your life and your desires and your experiences and your fears and all about you. So you're going to connect your own self with the cards. That's a great way to learn tarot. But also, the process of journaling is going to help you discover more about yourself. We are vast, complicated people, individuals. We are like an entire galaxy inside of this body, this soul, this spirit, this mind. And we've been constructed in life. We've had to follow a lot of rules and we've been told how to be. But there's a you in there that's, of course, very alive right now, but there's even more that maybe you don't know about. I am always learning more about myself. And one way I do that is through journaling. I'm a big believer in it. It's good for your mental health, it's good for processing feelings. And the more we know ourselves, which we can do through journaling, the more powerful our magic can become. Because magic is about taking your intention, knowing what you want, putting some action behind it, and co creating with the universe. So, when you really know what you want and when you're really in a rooted place around who you are, your magic just gets bigger. So, the Creative Magic Collective, everyone in the collective gets a copy of this book. And then we go on this journey for 12 months. Every month, we have a group support call. Every week, we have journaling sessions online. You can come or not, but we get to write together. And you also get some one on one coaching from me. So it's self paced in that you get to move through the book at your own, in your own timing. You might be journaling a lot some weeks and journaling not so much some others, but you have a whole year to go through the book with us. And it's this personal experience, but you also have this group support. And I did kind of an experimental version of this group in 2023. And just the people who really invested in it were incredible, creative. They were so good to each other. They learned from each other. We had amazing conversations. And, a lot's going to come up for you when you're journaling and when you're discovering yourself. And it's like, what do I do with this? And that's where the support can help you take what you're finding out and put it into action in your life, make the magic. So I invite you to join us. You can go to our website and learn more about the Creative Magic Collective. There's a link in our show notes. If you're not ready for that, check out some of the other cool stuff we have. We have mystic messages that get sent to you in the mail. We got plenty of other stuff. We got a blog. Enjoy, get to know us. We'd love to hear from you. I'm so glad you joined us for this episode. I hope you found something that serves you and supports you in your creative and magical life. If you enjoyed what you heard today, you can support the podcast by sharing it with a friend or leaving a review. We also have curated a affiliate shop in bookshop.org. And inside that shop, we have a number of collections on witchcraft and folklore. We have a collection of tarot decks. We have books on tarot. We have a collection on ecology and one on justice and one on money and one on psychology. And there are others. When you purchase a book through our shop, which you can find on our homepage, we get 10% of your purchase. And bookshop.org is a beautiful alternative to Amazon. They share their profits with independent bookstores across the country, whereas Amazon makes life actually harder for independent bookstores. So if you shop with us, we appreciate your support. I also want to thank Annar Veröld for joining me for this beautiful conversation about the Fool. Thank you as well to Chantal De Felice for creating the beautiful sounds you hear throughout this episode and for her wonderful and talented editing skills. Thanks as well to Ami Plus for creating our wonderful logo. You can learn more about all of them and find all the links in the show notes. I hope to be with you in our next episode. Until then, take care, have fun, and enjoy your creative and magical life.